Does traditional education deliver or fall short in educating and nurturing children? Introducing Aligned Learning Revolution, the show that confronts conventional norms and presents dynamic alternatives to transform education. Host Kahila Sivas tackles the foundational issues within classroom walls and advocates for holistic learning opportunities. It's time to reveal the strength of the innovative holistic NeuroGrowth learning approach that goes beyond conventional teaching or tutoring methods, assuring every learner of a stress-free learning journey to unlock their fullest potential. Now, join Kahila Sivas.
Hello and welcome. Today, my guest is Marnie David. She is not just a teacher, she is also a holistic neurogrowth learning success coach and a writer who helps young children feel better about themselves. Marnie knows what it's like to feel awkward and unsure because she's been there. But she has come a long way, and now she's using her story to help others find their confidence. She helped many kids and even her own family how to be proud of who they are. So let's dive in and hear all about Marnie's tips and tricks for feeling great about ourselves. Hello, Marnie. Welcome to our show today. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you for coming in. So, Marnie, tell us, why do you help children and others feel better?
Sure. Well, my whole life, I struggled with self-esteem. Growing up, I'm a twin. So I have a twin sister, and we're actually only 3 minutes apart in age. So naturally, I always just had someone right there next to me to compare myself to. And I just compared myself to everything about her. In my head, she was better at math, better at sports, better at making friends, everything. So I always just my whole life told myself I wasn't worthy. I always compared myself. And I knew that when I became a teacher, that I did not want my students to ever feel that way. I didn't want them to compare themselves to other people. And so I basically made it my mission to work with kids on feeling good about themselves. That was the number one thing. Before even teaching or academics or any of that, I wanted to make sure that they felt good.
So this comparison, was it something that you created from young age, or was your parents also doing that because they had twins at the same time?
Yeah, I feel like my parents had good intentions, right? And I feel like all parents have good intentions. But I think naturally, when you have two kids, well, I also have a brother. And when you have 3 kids, but 2 that are twins, I think it's natural to just compare. And my parents had a pretty fixed mindset about things. Like, I'm not, and I would hear, my mother say, well, I'm not a math person, or, you're good at this and I'm not good at this. And so I thought everything was always fixed as a kid. Everything was set in stone, and you're born and you have this set of skills. You're good at these things and you're not good at other things, and that's it. So, yeah, I think it started definitely from just how I grew up and having that fixed mindset in the back of my mind.
Yeah. And how was your relationship with your sister while you were growing up? You were always comparing. So how was that relationship?
It was, we had a pretty good relationship. Now we're best friends, but, as sisters, we were definitely a little competitive, especially when we got older into high school. But we were pretty close. It was just, I had set in my mind that she was good at all of these things and I wasn't. And we kind of fell into those roles. So she kind of embraced that, and embraced being the president of all the teams. And I kind of just retorted into this awkward person with low self-esteem and low self-worth for most of my young adult and childhood.
So were you like looking up to your sister, or was it a constant comparison in your mind?
I think a little bit of both. I think I was definitely comparing myself to her and wanting to be more like her. Like, why can't these things come easily to me? You know, and later on, like I felt, now that I talk to her, she's like, no, I worked really hard at these things. And I just always thought, you know, well, they come easy to her and I'm just not going to try. So,
So we this comparison, right? I always talk about when we're parents, we sometimes do it unintentionally, right? It never intentionally to harm our kids, right? We're not doing it for unintentionally. We say things like, like you've been saying a couple of times, I'm not a math person. That's a big deal for a child to learn that. We're not a math family because I've been working with so many math families myself who come to get help from me. And that's one thing they always say, we're not a math family. I'm not a math person. And then all of a sudden you just shut the door, right? Because
right,
we're not born with math,
right,
skills, because it's something that we developed as a
right.
society. It's a concept, but it means a lot more than a concept because it all validates in the environment we live in. But it's still, when we say it, our kids take it as so meaningful, powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, my whole life I said, I'm just not a math person. And then later when I became a teacher, um, the math staff developer in my school had this beautiful poster. She's now the principal of my school. Um, and she had this beautiful poster and with pictures of all the children in her class at the time. And it said, how to be a math person. Number one, be a person. And number two, do math. And
Perfect.
that stuck with me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that how we learn anything? If I want to be a piano person,
Mm-hmm.
be a person and practice piano.
Right. And I
Right?
do think that it comes naturally to some people. Some people are born with these skills and it's in their genes to be a piano player. But that doesn't mean that, you and I can't learn to play piano. It might take longer for us. We might have to work a little harder than people that, have that natural talent. But yeah, it wasn't until I started developing this growth mindset and learning about growth mindset and teaching it to my students that this whole world opened up to me. And as I was teaching it to my students, I learned like, wait a minute, I'm an athlete. I started going for runs and doing races. I could be an athlete. And I can be a math person. When I became a teacher, I had to teach myself the math that I never really understood as a kid. And when I learned how to teach it to myself, when I learned how to learn, as we talk about as coaches, it's like, oh, I do understand this math and I just had to learn it in a different way. The way that I was taught and the mindset that I had was, well, I'm bad at math and I don't understand this. But this whole world kind of opened up to me when I realized that, I can have a growth mindset and I just have to change my perspective and the whole world, all these doors just open up.
Yeah. So
It's
when you
pretty
say
cool.
growth mindset, even mindset, the word mindset is a resulting situation, right? It's a result.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Growth mindset is a result. So what does it take for someone to get to a growth mindset? There's a path, there's a journey to it, right? You just don't arrive
Mm-hmm.
there. There's a journey you took there. So first, I think, what do you think was the first step you did to learn math?
I think just discovering that, wait a minute, like this is something that I can do. I think step one is, having a struggle and recognizing the struggle. Okay, like this is something that's really, really hard for me. Um, and then breaking it down and saying, it's just something that I have to unpack and teach myself and then try. So I think it's just a process of learning.
Yeah. And learning how we learn.
Right.
Like, how do I learn is so
Right.
important. Doesn't matter
Right.
how anybody else learns, but how do I
Mhm.
learn? And that's
Right.
what is missing in our system, in the school system, is that we don't allow our students to discover how they learn because every child learns differently, right?
I was really amazed when I went to college, and college was actually a time in my life where learning was easy. Because I realized, okay, I have to take all this material and teach it to myself. and I sat in my dorm room and I taught myself, the math concepts, or I looked through the books and I learned how to take notes and highlight my notes and study everything myself. And once I started doing that, I realized that I can do hard things. And I started having this mantra, like, this is tough, but I'm tougher. And I say that to my students all the time. I'll be in front of the classroom and I'll be struggling with technology, like setting up, the computer to project onto the board. And, as adult, it comes so easily to kids, but as adults, that technology can be so tricky. So I'll use that as an opportunity. I'll be in front of the class, struggling, feeling myself get hot. Everyone's watching, it's not working. And I'll say, okay, Miss David, this is tough, but I'm tougher. I could do hard things, and I'll stand there and I'll grapple with it for a while and I'll get it. And they'll see that. And then when I see them struggling, I try to remind them of those words. Like, no, what do you have to tell yourself? This is tough, but I'm tougher.
Yeah.
You remember you got through that tough thing last time. You can get through that tough thing again.
Yeah. And it's pushing that boundary, right? Boundary of what is tough for you earlier is no longer tough. Now the next tough is
Right.
the next obstacle. And I think we always, as everyone, like all of us, when we say I can't do something, we're just basically raising a wall in front of us, right? Like putting a block in front of us so that we can't pass
Absolutely.
through it. So as long as
Absolutely.
we see the wall, and usually, we tend to blame others, like somebody else said it, but it's
Right.
most of the time our stories that create that wall. And if we can
Right.
break that wall, and then we can do tougher things. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. I actually wrote that down. So,
Huh.
so how did you decide to become a teacher?
I actually come from a few generations of teachers. So
Okay.
both my parents were teachers and my grandfather was a teacher. So that was kind of always in my blood. But I knew, when I thought about what I wanted to do when I grew up, that was always something that was in the back of my mind. But it wasn't until I was like in my 20s when I was in college and really thinking about what I was going to do. I knew that I didn't want other kids to struggle like I did. I didn't want children to have low self-esteem like I did. So I really wanted to become a teacher, work with these kids, and just make them feel good about themselves. Even if, that meant that we weren't doing academics all the time. I just wanted them to learn to feel good about themselves, because there was something I always just struggled with. Silently. No one really knew about it. My teachers didn't really know. I was always very well behaved and always did the right thing. But inside, there was just this, like sad, low self-esteem kid. And I didn't want my students to ever face that again. So I really
And
wanted to do that as a
during that
teacher.
time, what helped you internally? How did you help yourself? Because you're feeling this low self-esteem, you're not telling anyone. I'm sure you also made your parents feel like you're okay. Because
Right.
you
Yeah.
didn't go to them. Did you go to them for support?
No, I kind of just, I always kept everything inside. So the way that I help myself feel better is, a lot of self-talk. There was a lot of negative self-talk there, but there was also, a lot of journaling. I did do a lot of journaling, even as a young kid, and that was just a way for me to express my feelings and feel better. I think while I was going through things, I had a lot of these big feelings, but when I came home, and I still have so many of the journals, but I would write a lot of my feelings down. And I think just getting that out on paper is so important. When we keep it inside, it turns into this toxic, energy, and it turns into so much anxiety comes out later as adults. And one thing that I do in the classroom is I have a feelings wheel. And this is something that can work with any age, from elementary school up through high school. But I noticed that kids really have a hard time expressing how they feel. Like we have such a limited vocabulary, like, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad. Those are like the three words that young children, and even like in high school, I've noticed kids don't have the vocabulary to express their emotions. But with the feelings wheel, you can really look at, okay, this is how I'm feeling, and developing this vocabulary, like, oh, wait, I'm frustrated, or I'm feeling inferior, or I'm feeling, inadequate, or, even some positive feelings as well. I'm really excited. But recognizing those feelings and having the language for it takes away from all of the anxiety. Just putting a label and recognizing it really helps with feeling better and knowing where you can go from there.
Because frustration versus I'm sad or mad, frustration actually goes to the source, because there must be something that's frustrating you. So what is that thing that's frustrating you? So we can actually go to the source of it and really dig in and fix it. But that's very, 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 I never thought of it like that. And I always talk about, we always talk about a lot of things as the end words. Like, for example, I was earlier mentioning mindset. It's an end, like people say, have positive mindset, have growth mindset. Okay, I'm trying, but I don't know how,
Right.
because it's the end part of it. What about the journey to it? How do I get to my growth mindset?
It's a process.
It's a process, right? So we don't, like, that's why a lot of students and a lot of kids have trouble with those words, as we're talking the end result.
Right.
I know you want me to be that, but I don't know how to get there. Who's
Right.
going to tell me how to get there? Right? Same for the feelings, like you just mentioned. If I just say sad and mad, I don't know. Why are you sad and mad? I need more information. But if you're frustrated, I know something is not working for you, right? Something is happening that's frustrating. Is it someone or something, or is it you? Then we can get to it. Yeah, that's pretty cool to look at it that way. So then you got into teaching, and then now you are a holistic neurogrowth learning success coach as well. So why did you choose to become a holistic neurogrowth learning success coach? And if parents are, listening to this, tell me the difference that you see between being a teacher and holistic neurogrowth learning success coach.
Yeah, well, as a teacher, I have most of my classes are between 25 and 30 students. So it's a lot of kids. And the way that the school is set up is I have to teach to the middle. I have to teach a curriculum that's set for where most of the kids are. And it kind of leaves out the kids that are struggling or children that need to be challenged. And especially with social emotional work, which is something that's really, really important to me. I didn't have the time in the day or in my schedule to really work with that. Like maybe a small percentage of the time, I'd be able to work with those students. So I was always teaching to the middle. And then those kids who, put their head down during math because they're frustrated, or who are acting out during a lesson because they're bored, because it's not challenging. I don't have the resources or time to address that and to really find out what's going on with those kids. But as a coach, I can work with these children one-on-one and really customize a plan and find out what's going on, what's causing, getting to the root cause of what's upsetting them, and getting to work with them just on a holistic level, not just academically.
And at school, most of our job, as a teacher is to deliver the curriculum, because you do have deadlines to meet, you do have testings to do, report cards to send. So there's a time frame that you have to run with, right? So then you have to teach to the middle, because there's no way you can address everyone's concern or everyone's social emotional needs or any of that stuff. But here, this is different. As a learning success coach, you're teaching them not only like what they're learning, but also how to learn, right? Which is a big part of what you do as a learning success coach, which is interesting.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that. What does that mean for parents? Like when we're teaching what to learn versus how to learn, and even why do you learn, right?
Right. Yeah, I think, these children are coming home with homework, and they just have to complete the assignment and get the answers right. And parents kind of just tell them, well, this is how I learned math, so this is how you're going to do it. You have to carry the one and you have to, add but like, what's really the math behind that? So I think just understanding what works best for the kid and letting them explore the math problems on their own, and maybe trying out different techniques, because one technique doesn't work for everybody. So parent has to kind of allow their kid at home to try out many different strategies and see what works best.
And as a coach, what we do is get the students or the child to explore that, because a lot of the time it only comes through exploration, what works for me.
Right.
Because we necessarily don't know what works for me, right? By exploring, making mistakes. Yes. They're going to give us feedback, right?
Yes.
It'll help the child learn more about themselves. And also mistakes are really good, because then you can teach them how to deal with it.
Right.
Especially with the subject like math, because most of us usually shut down. Oh, I got it wrong. I must not be good at math. Just put it away.
I'm not a math person. Yep.
Let's close the book. Instead, now let's look at, where did we go wrong? And why is this wrong? And why is your answer not right? And sometimes I teach my students, like, don't just take the book for it. Like, question it. I did all the steps, right? So why is my answer wrong? It's a valid question. So you got to become like an investigator, not just give up because the book says it's the wrong answer. Maybe they're wrong.
And I feel like that's where you learn the most, is when you make those mistakes and you understand, okay, well, I made this mistake. Oh, that's because I was doing this wrong. Like the things that, and I always go back to, when I think about like a growth mindset, I always go back to the kitchen and cooking.
Yes.
And if I'm cooking something and my meal comes out way too salty, well, that gives me feedback. And I know for next time, I'm going to use a quarter of that amount of salt. Or if it comes out burnt, well, I'll know next time when I make this dish, I'm going to put the temperature lower. But I wouldn't know those things unless I make those mistakes. And it's the same in the classroom. It's the same with math. And that's how the best way to teach ourselves is by making these mistakes and knowing where we're struggling. And that's going to help us learn how to do things in our own way.
Yes. And how do you help your sons? Because you have 2 kids now yourself. You said your mom did a little bit, your parents did a little bit of comparison that kind of got you started. How about yourself? Do you protect yourself from doing that? Comparing them both?
It's funny because we grow up a certain way and then we tell ourselves, well, as parents, I'm going to either be the complete opposite, or we tend to adapt, what we learned from our parents. And I think I'm doing a little bit of both. If I, catch myself comparing my kids, I'll catch that right away because I don't want to do that and I don't want them to feel that way. But yeah, I definitely use that language with my kids when they're doing their schoolwork, and even when they're not doing their schoolwork, I'll use that language like, oh, this is so hard, but I can do this. I could do hard things. And when my children are doing their work and getting frustrated, my older son especially gets very frustrated if he doesn't get the answer correct right away. And as parents, it's so hard to do schoolwork with your children. Even as a teacher, I'm like, oh, I have all these skills in the classroom. I know how to teach. But working with your own child at home is different. A whole different story, because that's where all the behaviors happen. So my son will throw his book on the floor or tell me I don't know anything. So it's so hard working with your own children with homework. And I'm a teacher, so I can only imagine, other parents working with their kids on their homework, just how, and they're not necessarily trained in how to teach these things. So it must be even that much harder. But
I find it same too with my son. I have a different expectation. It's just expectation, right? We as parents, we have a relationship and we have an expectation with our kids already. Those 2 are already at the forefront, and then we try to teach. Doesn't matter how much training one has. It
Nope.
just, the dynamic is so different. And they also behave differently because the way they, and sometimes it's not the way they sit that's bothering, like the way he sits is bothering me. He's not holding the pencil that's bothering me.
Yes.
Like certain things that just kind of bothers you and you're like looking at it and you want to correct it, but that's not the whole point of this exercise. This exercise is for him to get the work done. So I can't talk
Yes.
about that. So I have to hold myself back. And then
Yes.
you have to learn this newfound patience, which is so hard to bite your tongue with a lot of different things. And I always hire someone for my son to work with him, even though I'm a, success coach myself, because I recognize that I have different expectation for my own son.
Yes. Absolutely. And
Comes to
yeah, it's so much harder. So much
Yeah.
harder working with your own kid at home.
Yeah, and
Yes.
your patience is very thin, right? It's
Yes.
very thin. It'll just fade very quickly. So you have to be mindful because that's when you can actually damage your child. Because whatever you're gonna
Right.
say, and you might be triggered from your own parents' parenting.
Absolutely.
And then
Yes.
you drop something in and you'll regret it so much after because you just dropped something that you would never want to drop. So to protect all that, I just get him to do it on his own. And even if I explain something, oh yeah, that's another thing. I never sit with him. Like I
Yeah.
explain something, I have to walk away. I will never sit and watch him do it because the speed he's doing is not enough for me. I want him to do
Right.
it faster. And I'm like, no, you can't say you should do it faster. Walk away, walk away. The whole time I'm coaching myself while I'm trying to help my son because, I could turn into my dad quickly too, because my dad was very strict. We
He
grew
called
up
your
in,
name.
yeah, like when I was growing up, if we didn't get something like that, he'll be like, what are you, stupid?
Oh, yeah. That's so tough.
Right? So me, if my son doesn't get it, my dad shows up.
Right. Right. In your
So I
head.
have to go walk away, walk away, walk away. I'm like, don't say anything, walk away. This is different. You're not your dad. So continuous training. And that's what I put in my book. One of the chapters in my new book was about how your parents' parenting will affect your parenting.
Yes. Even though we try so hard to not, right? To not make the same mistakes our parents made. Yes, it always comes out. But the good thing is, all of the good things come out also.
Yeah.
All the good qualities do
So what
too.
I do before, it's a very good topic because a lot of parents do help their kids. And it is good to help your kids because that's where you're bonding and they're seeing that, my dad and my mom cares about my work, right? Cares. And, having them on the dining table at the evening time and doing that work established as a routine. And they're proud to share their work. But before you get into that, you must tell yourself, patience, and don't say
Yes.
things that you're going to regret, and
Yes.
basically coach myself before I enter the scene.
That's so important. Yes. And to not have to control every little thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when my son's doing his homework, his handwriting, I'm like, come on,
yeah,
you have better handwriting than that. Say,
yeah.
my teacher doesn't care. Oh, stop it, Bobby. And I have to kind of walk away, like
Yep.
pick the things that you really want to be helping him with. Is this that important right now?
No.
So right.
Yeah, handwriting is one of them that upsets me too, and I don't say anything. I'm like, yeah, as long as you can read it, just
Can you
make
read
it
it
so
though?
that make it I can read it too a little bit, and then
Right.
we're good. But I'm gonna walk away because I'm gonna say something that I don't want you to hear.
Yes.
But when we were kids, we practice handwriting, right? Like the
Yes.
actual, like we needed to practice day after day. I love that because I still, when I'm doodling, I go back to those days. I remember, and I
Yeah.
start doodling my name or something, and
Right.
it's a passive time. It's artistic. Like you get into the art mode, right? I
Yeah,
like
and
it,
it's
but now,
cathartic.
yeah, it helps you relax. But now that we don't teach our kids those,
Nope.
so that's
Yeah.
gone. I really like that. You know, the time that I got to learn how to handwrite.
Yeah.
But tell me, how about the boys? Like, do they compare themselves? Do you see that?
I actually don't see that at all. They are like night and day, my two children.
Mm.
And there's a 3.5 year difference. So that might have something to do with it. They're not too close in age.
Yes.
But I'm lucky. I'm very happy that they don't compare themselves, compare each other. Maybe when they get older, things might change. And that's when I'll have to start, stepping in or just noticing that and trying to help them from comparisonitis.
Yes.
That's
it's a symptom.
yeah.
It is a disease.
Yes.
But because you were shy, do you see your boys, do you recommend them to journal? You know how you said journaling helped you? Did you
Yes.
put that habit into their life, or are they doing that?
Yes. Actually, my older son journals and writes all the time. My younger son, he's in first grade. He's a little younger. He hasn't started that yet, but my older son does journal.
That's awesome.
And I think, yeah, they both pick up on things that they see me doing. So they see me journaling
Yeah.
sometimes, they see me
Modeling.
reading. Yeah. Some of my behaviors, I don't want them to be copying. So I really try to pay attention and do the behaviors that I want them to model. So yes, I spend time journaling, even meditating, exercising. Yeah. And they see that. And I'm hoping that part of them is absorbing that and,
Yes, beautiful.
learning to do that too. Yeah.
Of course they do, right? They are watching us all the time. So we have to be
Always.
careful what we're saying. And then my son
Mhm.
just went to Chile, and he's with the homestay now. And my mother-in-law said he should take a diary with him, a book with him, a simple book. And she said, write every day, like one thing or something that happened that day.
Yeah.
And by the time you come back in July, you will have a whole storybook to tell everyone. And you don't have to
Wow.
tell everyone if you don't want to, but at least you had
Right.
something to write and write. So that's
Right.
what she did every time she went traveling. She would take a book and write one day, every day, something about that day.
Even one sentence.
Yeah. She said, don't have to be long, just something.
Right. Yeah.
Write something. Because we
great.
forget. After you come back from a long trip or long, overstay or somewhere, and you don't remember, what did I do that day? Oh, I don't know. It all blends, right?
It blends together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think like looking at the pictures will like give you all the memories, but it's not the same.
No, words are
Yeah.
different. Words are different. That makes me want to ask you about your books. So you have 2 books out.
Yes.
Yes. So tell us about those books. Why did you write them? And what are the names?
Yeah. So I wrote 2 books about confidence and self-esteem and social skills. So the first one is called The Confident Teen, and the second one is called The Social Teen.
So this is for teenagers?
Yeah, this is for teenagers. Yeah. Because most of my work is with elementary school age kids. I work in elementary school. But I really wanted to do something that would impact teenagers or kids as they got older. Because that's when I remember, just as a teenager, that's when I really had the most trouble. Like I went into a little bit of depression and like really, really tough times. And I wasn't teaching that age, but I knew I wanted to have some kind of impact. So I wrote those 2 books. So the first book really talks about comparisonitis and how social media, I love that word. I use it all the time now, even with my kids, but how that can really affect your self-esteem. And really just the big takeaway from that is just to be your authentic self, even if, you think you're awkward or nerdy or whatever it is, like that your people, your real people are going to, and it's a filter, right? So you're yourself, and then the people that aren't your people will just naturally filter away. And those who are your friends that are meant to be your friends will like you for exactly who you are. So that was the first one. And my second book is about conversation skills and social skills and conversation skills. And, I feel like that's a lost art, especially now. Everybody's on social media, everybody's on the computer. We don't know how to interact with each other.
Texting,
right?
3-letter words.
And we're not talking on the phone anymore. We're just texting with each other.
But
So,
I think you have a even bigger message there is that during those ages of, from the puberty, like, getting into the 13s, 14s, um, I think we shut down. We are trying to find our voice, right? I don't know if it happened to you. I kind of lost complete myself in, like, I don't know. I was scared to talk many times because I wasn't sure if I had the adult language. I didn't have this young person language anymore. I was in kind of in the middle zone.
Yeah, you're trying to figure out who you are, and it's so confusing.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I wasn't sure I was going to be accepted. And if somebody says, like, if my dad said, like, phone this office, I had the biggest fear to phone any offices because I'm
Right.
like, what do I say? Hello, what? What if they ask me this? So, like, all
Right.
these scenarios I will play out
Yes.
and I freak out and then I pick up the phone and then it'll be
Stutter.
fine. Stutter,
Yeah.
but it'll be fine. It'll
Yeah.
work out. But it was like any phone calls was the worst thing in my life at that time because
That's
I
so
didn't know what's
interesting.
good. Right? It didn't happen to you, but I think it's a teenage thing.
Yes. Yeah, because making a phone call, you have to really be asking for something specific, and there's certain language that you have to use. And that's not something that we use in every single day, like
Yeah, and
having
I
to
would
ask
pick
for
up.
something.
I would
Yeah.
pick up and I would not give any background. And I would just ask the question because my dad just said, ask
Yes.
the question. I'm like, to the
One
question.
pizza, one pizza, please. Like, what? Wait, you want something delivered? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. There was no
yeah.
introduction. There was
Right.
no background information. It was just
Right.
like, boom, here's my question. Answer me. And then, like, who are you? I'm like, oh, yeah, I have to start with my name. And I tell my son, who is now 17, but
Mhm.
earlier, when I would tell him, he would not call the person. He would say, "Yeah, yeah, I'll call. I'll put it on my list." But then I started joking with him, "Is that on your
Mhm.
list?" Because he started creating this list for everything I was telling
Your
him
never ending list of things that you say you're going to
to
do.
do.
Right.
So he had a fear of calling because then when they get their first job, they have to drop their resume, their application, and they have to speak to a stranger for a job. And that was hard for him because he's like, what do
Right.
I say? What if he has that? What if he did this? That? I'm like, just go to the appointment and just
Mhm.
relax and just be yourself. Just answer the questions he asks you. You don't have to prepare because you're not lying. It's
Right.
the
Right.
truth. Whatever
Yeah.
is the truth, just tell them that. Just be who you are. And that's how he got his first job. He said, that was not that bad. He came back saying,
And the next one will be even easier. Yeah.
yeah, so
Just,
that's a very important book for teenagers, conversations. And do you
mhm.
talk about different conversations or just, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I have different scenarios for like,
nice.
if you're in school or if you're at a family gathering or, even like a church setting, community setting, all different kinds of situations. And
Perfect.
yeah, how to start a conversation, how to end a conversation, even, how to make friends. So
Did
yeah.
you go into the body language too?
Yes. Oh, body
Yes,
language is a huge one. Yes.
part of
Open and
communication.
closed.
Yeah,
Yes. Eye
love it.
contact. Yes.
Yes, that's another one for teenagers. They don't look at you,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So often, yeah, I see people, especially teenagers and young adults, just looking down or looking at their phone. So yeah, my book, I talk about, looking someone in the eyes, having open body language, not slouching, but standing with your arms by your side
Mhm.
confidently, and that'll help the other person feel more comfortable too, that you're talking to.
Yeah. So confidence is so important to the conversation you're going to have, right? Your body posture is so
Yes.
important too.
Mhm.
And it changes your volume too. I've been
Yes.
practicing that
Oh,
because of
right. Yep.
because of speaking on podcast and stuff. I've been speaking from my diaphragm more
Oh, that's
than
what they
from
tell
here.
singers to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what my training has been. So
Mhm.
where can parents find your books, these two books? Where are they?
They're on Amazon, and they're also sold online stores like Barnes and Noble and Target, but mostly if you just go on Amazon, you can find them hardcover and paperback. Yeah.
Awesome. And how do you suggest the parents use it? Do the parents have to read it too, or is it just for the child? How did you, when you wrote it, what
Yeah.
did you have in your mind?
So I had in mind that I wrote it for teenagers. So the voice that I use is a voice that's, I speak to the teenager, but I also think parents, teachers, any kind of caregiver, counselors, I think that book would be helpful for them as well, even just to skim and see, you know, what is being taught in the book, and they can use those skills to teach, you know, the kids that they're working with as well. But it is written for teenagers, but it could be for anybody.
And what if a parent buys it and the teenager says, no, thank you?
Yes.
It can happen. So how do you suggest they actually bring this book or any book, right? Sometimes I have a recommendation for my son because we're so consumed with other stuff now as in a society as well. Reading has become less and less, right? But if we don't, as parents, bring the book to our kids and say, let's read, and if we don't model, like you earlier said, there's a chance that they'll never read a book, right? So we do have to make sure they are reading, and they might, yeah. So how do you think a parent, like, let's say I'm going to take it to my 17-year-old.
Right.
How do I introduce it?
Well, you can say, you know, I found this really great book, and it's about somebody that struggled as a teenager. It's not this stuffy book written by this, you know, academic, right? Even though I do consider myself a little bit of an expert.
You are, but I'm saying, like, you know how sometimes people talk down, like they don't share their vulnerability. You've already shared your vulnerability, right? It's so important. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yes, all these stories from my own life are shared in the book. So it's like, it's like getting down to earth with them, being like, listen, I've been there. Like, I know exactly what you're going through. So it's kind of like a companion to their life. You know, it's not like a kind of academic textbook. And the social skills book has a lot of quizzes also to see, okay, well, what's my personality like and how am I in social situations? So it's good just for them to, you know, get to know themselves. But I think with reading books, it's good to, and I do this myself because I try to set goals for reading because I kind of fell out of the habit of reading and I'm trying to get back into it. So having a goal like a chapter a day, and even if that's too much, you know, like maybe a chapter a week even, you know, but having that goal, can you try to, you know, you don't have to read the whole book, but let's just try with the chapter and see if you like it. And see, you know, give it a chance. But
when I read The Atomic Habit, I wanted my son to read it.
Yes.
And I knew he wasn't going to read it because I asked him and he said, it's on my list, Mom. I said, okay, that list.
That list.
That list is never going to be done. So I'm going to make that list that item on that list come up at the beginning of the list, right?
Yes.
So then when we went on a trip, I always find that on trips we have so much time, me too, right? Because we're busy parents too. So we went on a trip and I would say, okay, in the evening I would read and I say, I want to share something with you. And he wasn't going to read it. So I was like, I want to share this page with you. And then, can you just read it? Because and then I want you to tell me, because I have something I thought about. I wouldn't tell you. So I make it so like exciting, like you got to find something in there. What is she talking about? And then when he got hooked up on a couple of different pages, then he said, that's interesting, some of the stuff, Mom.
It's so interesting. I love that book.
Yeah. So then he wasn't going to read it. If I gave him the whole book, it's pretty thick too, right? Yeah. It's never going to happen. But we didn't end up finishing it. But we took a majority of, like, you know, parts of it that I read. I gave him to read it. And then we had a conversation. So that's another way to introduce a book if your child's not going to read, because teenagers, you know, these days, even those days when I was young too, if my dad gave me something, I wouldn't have read it because I'm like, no, I'm not reading it because we are rebellious, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's such a great tip for parents is to read it in front of them and to have a conversation about it. And it's funny that you mentioned Atomic Habits, because that's the book that I'm just finishing up. I'm reading right now. But my son, my 10-year-old, asked me when I'm going to finish it because he wants to read it next. And I'm like thinking to myself, well, it might be a little bit, I don't know if it's for his age group, but you know what? I'm not going to fight that. Like if that's something that he's interested in, he's looking up to me in the most amazing way. So I'm so happy. Yeah. So, with the social teen and the confident teen, even having it and parents reading it in front of their kids and talking about it. I mean, that's a start, and then maybe they'll pick it up when you're not looking and start to read it
Yes.
themselves without you forcing them.
That's why we have to have books around the house.
Yes.
Magazines, books, newspapers, because when our kids get bored, and if there's something there, they will look and they might even glance at it and read it. Right? It's important to
Yes.
have that. If otherwise they're just bored.
Right.
That's why I had always had paper, pen everywhere in my house. And my son is still, he makes me hand-drawn birthday cards and all the cards that he never buys them.
Oh, that is
He
so sweet.
always, yeah, he always had crayons, like always. Even I have them now. He's 17.
Yes.
And for my last birthday, he made a card for me, drawn.
Oh,
And
that is
so
really sweet.
that's because I left them around. So I think some unschooling parents also do that. So it's because it's
Right.
natural. You leave it as a natural things around it, and that's what they will go for. So it's a
Yes.
really good idea too. So as a learning success coach, Marnie, so what do you offer now to students? What kind of programs do you offer?
So my main focus is on writing skills because it's a passion of mine. So I help students who are struggling with writing, with getting their ideas on paper, with organizing their thoughts, even with the younger children, starting with just basic sentences. So that's one of my areas that I'm working with kids on. Also, mindfulness is another one of my areas of expertise. So, teaching kids to identify their feelings and doing breathing activities before we start our sessions. That's something that I work on as well. And reading.
Awesome. So if a parent is listening right now and their child is having writing issues, what's one tip you can share with them? So let's go with the teenagers, because that's what we're talking about here. So we have a teenager who doesn't like writing. Their essays are not handed in. They're getting low grades and they don't want to write.
Right.
How can they help them?
They can help them just by being supportive. I think that's the number one thing, and listening to them and finding out what's going on, why they're having trouble or why they're not wanting to write. And you could find out a lot just by being there and listening. You could find out, what the root of the problem is. Maybe it's the topic is something that they're not familiar with, or maybe they're worried about their spelling, or maybe they're worried about their handwriting, or they just feel like they have so much to say and not enough time to do it. So I think finding out the root cause of the problem, that's start, and then seeing if you could fix, one problem at a time. Okay, well, if it's spelling, like what can we do to help you figure out how to spell some of these words? Can we use dictionary, or can you just spell it the best you can, and we can go back and try to work on fixing those words and circling them. So just figuring out what the problem is or what really is holding them back and trying to tackle one problem at a time.
Absolutely. And what if teenagers tend to not want to respond to parents, right?
Yeah.
They tend to push them away. The minute as teenagers start struggling, what they do is push their parents away because they don't want them to know. They don't know how to tell them they're struggling. That's why I always say to parents that start conversations early, like your sons, where they are. If you have always had a conversation, guess what? They're not going to push you away because they already know how we had those conversations, right? Like my son will never push me away because I made sure, even if he's mad, and even if he knows that I'm going to say something's going to make him mad, he'll still tell me. It's just a matter of days that he will wait, and he'll say, I don't think I can hold this mom anymore because I'm not telling you the truth. So I have to tell you, I'm not doing well in this. I did this. I don't think it's right. Can you help me? So that's only happened because since the day he was born, I've always talked to him. I never judged him. Whenever he said something, I never, even though my dad wanted to come out of me and say things, I would stop it and I would swallow it.
Yes.
And say, that's not who you are. Don't say it. But you have to start early, right? It's really, really important. at
Yes.
your son's age are so precious where they are right now. If you can
Right.
do that, they will come to you.
Right. They
So
can feel like it's okay to, tell me they're struggling or tell me that something's wrong. Yeah.
yeah, and even with my son having that relationship with him, he says to me, I can't share feelings. As he got older and older, and he's
Mhm.
17, he would tell me, I can't tell you my feeling. I don't want to deal with my feelings.
Hmm.
That's one thing he would not do. And I mean,
Hmm.
I ask him, like, where did you get that? Like, why do you say that? What do you
Mhm.
mean you can't share your feelings? Says, no,
Hmm.
mom, I don't want to talk about it. I don't need a therapy. So
Hmm.
somewhere he feels like if you share feelings, it's
Right.
supposed to be therapy. I'm like, no, no one is giving you therapy. I'm not even a therapist. So, but as teenagers, they don't like to share feelings too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
they tend to. That's why asking them to write, like you said, journaling would help. They
Hmm.
don't have to tell us, but they
Right.
could write. They could dump it onto a paper, and
Right.
no one has to read it again. But by
Right.
allowing that, they are speaking out because sometimes they may not
Hmm.
tell us, right? Some feelings, 17-year-old doesn't want to tell his mom, right?
That's personal. Yeah.
Personal. So it's okay to write it down. So having something, a structure like that, like you recommended, would be a great thing to start
Hmm.
early. Now they have
Yes.
a tool they can go to.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And that could go with schoolwork, like I hate my writing teacher and I don't want to do my writing assignment, even like journaling about that.
yes, yes. Yeah, just I
Yeah.
hate her. Just let it out. Let it go.
Yeah.
But I still have to work with her because she's my teacher. So what do I do
Right.
now?
Right.
I had so many conversations with my son about that. He would say, I don't like the teacher, mom. I said, we can't change the class now. You're in it. So how are we going to problem solve?
Right. And
How
that's
are,
something that you have to, we're going to have to deal with our whole life is working with people that we don't like
yeah,
and just learning to work around it. So,
yeah,
you know, they can't be protected when they're in school from teachers that they don't like because they need to learn how to work for people and work with people that they don't like.
absolutely. So if you are a parent who has a teenager, I'm saying go back. You cannot really go back if you're already, if they're already a teenager.
Yeah.
I think your tool is number one, is asking
Mhm.
them, right, do some journaling, get the feeling out, go talk to your teacher, even if you cannot get in there and help them, they're shutting you down, like, away from you. Just
Mhm.
say, have you gone to talk to the teacher? Can I come and talk? Which they will say, no, absolutely, you're not getting
Yeah.
close to my teacher.
Yep. Do not
Don't
embarrass me,
you ever
mom.
do that. I can handle it. I can handle it. Okay. So when are you going to talk? So just being very, very proactive and giving them like instructions to go talk to them and ask them what you can do. Because sometimes if they fail something, if they don't go talk to the teacher, they can redo it. They might have a chance
Right.
to redo it. And this is the time for communication part, right?
Right. Yes.
How do you go
Yes. And
talk to your teacher?
right. You have to use those social skills and those conversation starters. Yeah. With
Yeah.
with your teacher. Right.
Yeah, and it is a tough time for many parents right now because the phone does have lots to do with our teenagers' life. It's part of
Yes.
it. Part of it, they
Hmm.
spend quite a bit of time on it. But again, as parents, we need to guide them to control the usage. They still need guidance. I think every child needs guidance,
Yes.
and they like it. They like it,
They need
even if they push
yes.
it, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Because you're showing that you care.
Yes.
Right? If you just say, okay, go on your iPad, I'm going to do my own thing, just get out of my way and be quiet. Even if you're not saying that, you're kind
Yeah.
of showing them that's how you feel if you don't set these boundaries. It's so
Yes.
much easier, to let both my sons be on their iPads or watch TV, so I can have quiet time. But like, what is that really showing them? So, and that does happen, I'm human, I see that happening sometimes. And that's when I have to set the boundaries and they'll fight with me. And it's so much harder, my little one will cry and even my older one, will get upset with me when I set those boundaries with their screens. But I think in the back of their mind, they're seeing, okay, well, she cares about me. She's setting boundaries and, she, wants me she wants to spend time with me, and she doesn't want me to just be in my room on a screen the whole night. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very important to set those boundaries now and the balance, because otherwise they're going to grow up not knowing what that is too, right?
Right.
Because this is the time to learn. So anything else you want to add?
No, this was really wonderful to talk to you about. I think self-esteem is so important with children and teenagers, and it's something that's not really spoken about so much in schools. And I think getting social emotional learning and getting to the root cause of our feelings and learning social skills is just so important. And it's something that we shouldn't overlook as teachers and as parents and coaches.
Yeah, social skills, especially as we go into more and more online and not being in present with others. And since COVID too, right?
Yes.
Not being around others, mannerisms have changed, communication patterns have changed.
Yes.
And because one of the things I look for is smile. Like, it's such a beautiful thing, right? Like during COVID, we couldn't see anyone smile. It was such, I got into depression because I receive energy from people smiling all the time. So I was like, then I started taking pictures of flowers during COVID. I would go outside and find flowers, and I have an Instagram with all these pictures of flowers during that time, because I was otherwise going to get depressed. I needed to see something beautiful, which was human smile. It's important for kids to know. So tell me before we go, what are some ingredients for self-esteem?
For self-esteem is positive self-talk, accepting yourself for your flaws and everything, positive self-talk,
be who you are. Accept.
Authenticity. Yes. Being your authentic self, and accepting yourself for who you are. Yeah.
And also, for me, I think vulnerability, like when I'm like, I just want it to be me, like, this is me. There's nothing different. Like, I'm not going to pretend to be something else or someone else.
Right. Yes.
This is me. Sometimes I speak like this. Sometimes I say something stupid to other people, but this is me. And then, as you said, whoever accepts us will stay with us. Whoever doesn't want us will go away. And that's the whole point. You can't be with everyone.
And that's a natural filtering system that we have through vulnerability and being authentic and not comparing yourself, right?
Yes.
So
comparison.
Very important.
So self-talk, acceptance, not comparing.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marnie. Lovely.
Thank you, Kohila.
Yeah, this was lovely. This is an awesome conversation. I think parents would have found lots of tips and to help their teenagers, because teenage years are so important, and it's also hard.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Be well.
So there you have it, another episode with Marnie. So we learned a lot on that episode. I took some notes so I don't forget some of the talking points. This is tough. I remember this very well. This is tough, but I am tougher than this that I'm going through. So this is so important to not give up. Never give up. We are going to face things that are hard, but we have to say, I'm going to do it. Now, I have talked about many times about saying, I'm not a math person, I'm not an English person. I used to say I'm not an English person until I started in my adulthood. I had to say, you know what? I can write, I can read, I can do things. I actually love English. So by just replacing those words, it's so powerful. It's so powerful for our children and for ourselves. So if you were struggling with math when you were young as a parent, don't share that with your child as, because I'm not a math person, you don't get the genes, so you're going to be also bad at math. You can share that I struggled, but I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I didn't have the best teacher. Maybe I just shut myself down. Maybe by sharing those, you will motivate your child to try. All they need to do is try to do math, and they'll become math person. So as Marnie says, to be a math person. You have to be a person and you have to do math. So to be an English person who's good at writing, I have to be a person and I have to do reading and writing. So it's easy when we put it that way. So I really love what she said. And she does have 2 books for teenagers. And I wanted to really ask her, how do we get our teenagers to read? Because I do have a teenager myself and I had other kids too. And I know how hard it is for them to receive a book and start reading, especially in this electronic world with the phone on their hand. So I find with my son, if I read it and I ask him, can you read this paragraph here? And I will give him a little chunk to read. And I say, and then I will discuss that with him. He would have never read the whole book by himself, The Atomic Habit by himself, because I know he wasn't going to do it because he said he's going to put it on the list. And I don't know if you have a child who puts their stuff on the list. So after I showed him these paragraphs, he read it and he was very excited to read more of those. So we have to really bring to our children to their attention that there's something interesting here. Read this. It's like showing them a newspaper and saying, look at this news, because we all get excited about latest news, right? It's the same way I'm doing it in the book. And have books around your house and in the bathroom, in living room, everywhere. Leave books and even leave papers and pens and crayons and coloring pencils, markers, because when they're bored, they will pick that up and they will draw. It doesn't have to be something big they do, but the habit, we're building that little habits adds up to the habit that they're going to have in the future. But if you do have a child who is already a teenager and they're not sharing their feelings with you, they are struggling in reading or writing, helping them as a parent is hard. We talked about that because the patience level that we have as parent helping our own kids is different than when we're helping others. As I said, I've been thinking about that myself. What is it that changes in me when I'm with my son versus with all the thousands of kids that I have helped in my life? I have pinpointed that it's always been my expectation. For some reason, as parents, we have different expectations for our kids versus what we have for other people's kids. And we have way bigger bandwidth of patience with other people's kids versus our kids. So and there's some things that they will trigger something that happened to you when you were young. That's why if you had a trauma growing up, or if you had parents who were tough and strict and they said some bad things to you, when you're working with your child, these can be triggered and you have to be very careful not to hurt them, because sometimes when we're triggered, we could hurt our kids. So that's why helping your kids, especially teenagers, is very hard. So what is the solution? Ask them to go talk to their teacher, teach them communication skills, buy Marnie's book and bring it into your home and teach them that communication skills and self-esteem so that they can start actually doing it by themselves. You can just be that guidance to them, the guiding force, but you can't really sometimes do it with them because they might push you away. We all did that too, right? Because when we are teenagers, we are very rebellious. So at the end, I asked Marnie 3 things about self-esteem. We talked about having positive self-talk. It's so important. This is all of my methodology as well. Always have been saying how we talk to our brain is how our actions and results are. So if we're talking it in a negative language, we're talking and saying all these negative things. We never say anything positive. Why would we expect any positive results or actions, right? So it's important to have positive self-talk. And then it's just acceptance of who I am. I am this person. I'm okay. It's okay. I am who I am. I'm beautiful. I'm this. I am this person. This is fine. And whoever I'm attracting, those are the people that I'm supposed to be with. Whoever I am reflecting are the people who I don't need. As she said, that is the filter that we all have. So it's important to honor that filter and then be you. And then we talked a lot about comparison. Now, this is one thing that I want to leave you today as parents listening to this is do not ever compare your kids to anyone, anything, or yourself or your other kids or other people's kids, because I don't know about you, I grew up with my dad comparing me to everyone and everything. It took me so long to get out that I don't need to compare myself. I'm not competing with anyone. I don't need to be compared. I just have to be myself, and I have to have positive self-talk, and I just have to be myself and be vulnerable and authentic. When I learned that, the comparison thing that my dad has implemented in my head or implanted in my head left, and I felt so relieved. So if you had parenting like that, those are things that we tend to follow. So I suggest that you be mindful and be careful when you do advise your children. Do it from a place of who they are, not from a place of you're this, they're this, why aren't you like this? If we start talking like that, it's a constant comparison, and they are like, well, I don't want to be them. I am me. So we need to honor that. So thank you so much for watching and listening. I'll see you on another episode.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Our purpose for this episode was to spark a reevaluation of the current education system. For more episodes offering practical and comprehensive strategies to enhance learning, please visit www.learningsuccessacademy.com. It is crucial to ensure that children have access to the holistic neurogrowth learning approach, enabling them to break free from the constraints of an outdated educational framework. This is your opportunity to gain insight and break away from a flawed system, setting your children on a path to lifelong success that truly nurtures their thirst for knowledge. That's all for now. We look forward to having you join us for the next episode.